Jacob Cole opened the door, expecting nothing. For 3 years, no one had come to his remote Texas cabin, exactly as he intended. He'd built his life on silence and distance, running from the screams that still echoed from Sand Creek. But the Comanche girl on his porch wasn't asking for much. Just shelter, just one night. He should have refused, should have closed the door on the danger her presence represented. But something in her steady gaze made him step aside. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that inside his cabin she would reveal a truth that would shatter his carefully constructed exile and force him to choose, keep running from his past or finally face it with an impossible act of redemption. Jacob Cole heard the knock just as the Texas sun dipped below the horizon, painting his cabin walls in shades of amber and blood. For 3 years, no one had come to this remote stretch of prairie. That was exactly how he wanted it. He'd built his life here on silence and distance, far from the memories of Sand Creek, far from the screams that still woke him at night, far from the man he'd been when he wore a cavalry uniform. The whiskey helped some nights. The isolation helped most. The knock came again, softer this time, almost hesitant. Jacob's hand moved to the revolver on his hip as he opened the door. A Comanche girl stood on his porch, no older than 17, her buckskin dress torn and dusty from hard travel. Her dark eyes held exhaustion, but no fear, a combination that unsettled him more than terror would have. "Please," she said in accented English, "shelter, just tonight." Every instinct told him to refuse. The Comanche and white settlers existed in an uneasy truce here, but her presence at his cabin could draw attention he'd spent 3 years avoiding. Besides, he'd forfeited the right to help anyone the day he followed orders at Sand Creek. But something in her steady gaze held him frozen. She wasn't begging. She was simply asking one human being to help another. "One night," he heard himself say, stepping aside. "You leave at first light." She nodded once and entered his cabin with the cautious grace of someone accustomed to danger. Jacob closed the door, already regretting his decision, but unable to explain why he'd made it. Jacob gestured toward the small table where his untouched dinner sat cooling. "You can eat. There's water in the bucket." The girl moved slowly, studying everything, the sparse furniture, the whiskey bottles lined against the wall, the cavalry saber he'd never managed to throw away despite burning his uniform. When her eyes landed on that blade, something flickered across her face. "You a soldier," she said, not a question. "Was," Jacob replied, the word tasting like ash. "Long time ago." She sat at the table but didn't touch the food. Instead, she watched him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "You know Sand Creek?" The name hit him like a fist to the gut. Jacob's jaw tightened. "Everyone knows Sand Creek." "You were there." It wasn't a question this time either, and Jacob felt the room tilt slightly. "How would you know that?" "Your eyes," she said quietly. "Men who see terrible things, they carry it differently. You carry Sand Creek." She paused, then added, "My name is Nadua. My mother was Cheyenne, from Black Kettle's village." The floor seemed to drop away beneath Jacob's feet. Black Kettle's village, the peaceful camp they'd attacked at dawn, flying white flags of surrender that Colonel Chivington had ordered them to ignore. Women and children cut down while trying to flee. He'd fired into the air, pretended to aim while his brothers-in-arms committed massacre, but he'd done nothing to stop it. "I didn't," he started, then stopped. What defense did he have? "I didn't kill anyone there, but I didn't stop it either." I know," Nadua said, "because my mother survived. She told me about a young soldier who fired above heads, who tried to warn people to run. She died 2 winters ago, but before she died, she described you. Brown hair, scar on left hand from broken rifle, green eyes that looked—" She searched for the word, "broken." Jacob looked down at the scar across his knuckles, proof of the rifle that had misfired when he deliberately jammed it. His hands were shaking. "Why are you here?" he whispered. "Why come to me?" Nadwa's eyes hardened with purpose. "Because I need the man who couldn't pull trigger, not the man who runs away." Jacob poured himself whiskey with trembling hands, then pushed the bottle away untouched. "You need to explain, now." Nadwa pulled something from inside her dress, a small leather pouch. She opened it carefully, revealing a folded paper bearing an official military seal. 3 days ago, I worked at trading post near Fort Sill. Soldier came through, drunk, talking loud. He left this in his coat. I took it." She unfolded the document. Jacob's blood turned to ice as he read. It was a military order authorizing a winter raid on a Comanche peace village camped near the Canadian River, a village that had been promised protection in exchange for peaceful settlement. The attack was scheduled for 4 days from now. The commanding officer's signature was Colonel Marcus Henshaw, the same man who'd been a captain at Sand Creek. "Another Sand Creek," Jacob breathed. "He's going to do it again." 300 people in that camp, Nadwa said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Women, children, elders. They surrendered weapons, moved where white government said. They believed promises. She leaned forward. "My father is there, my younger brother, my grandmother who raised me after mother died." Jacob's mind raced. "You need to warn them, get them to move." "They won't believe me," Nadwa said flatly. "Young girls saying soldiers will attack. They trust the treaty. They think I am afraid child seeing shadows." Her eyes burned into his. "But they will believe soldier. They will believe man who wears uniform, who knows how military thinks." "I'm not a soldier anymore," Jacob said, but even he could hear the weakness in his protest. "No," Nadwa agreed. "You are man who lives in cabin with whiskey and guilt, man who runs from what he couldn't stop." She stood, moving to face him directly. "But maybe you can be man who stops running, man who saves 300 people instead of watching them die." Jacob felt the weight of 3 years of isolation pressing down on him. He'd convinced himself that hiding was penance, that removing himself from the world was the price he owed for his failures. But Nadwa's presence in his cabin, her revelation, the document with Henshaw's signature, it felt like the universe had tracked him down and demanded a real choice. "If I do this," he said slowly, "if I try to warn them and fail, Henshaw will know someone leaked his plans. They'll hunt whoever helped you." "Yes," Nadwa said simply, "so we must not fail." The weight of that "we" settled between them like a covenant. Jacob didn't sleep that night. He sat at his table, staring at the document that proved history was about to repeat itself, while Nadwa rested fitfully in his chair by the fire. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Black Kettle's village, the white flags, the running figures, the blood in the snow. At dawn, he made his decision. "We leave in an hour," he told Nadwa. "The village is 3 days' hard ride. That gives us 1 day to convince them and get them moved before Henshaw's raid." Relief flooded her face, but she kept her voice level. "You will wear uniform?" Jacob looked at the saber on his wall, the last remnant of who he'd been. "No, I burned that life. But I know military protocol, strategy. I know how Henshaw thinks." He met her eyes. "And I know I can't live with myself if I let this happen again." They rode hard across the Texas plains, 2 unlikely allies racing against time and guilt. Jacob pushed their horses mercilessly, driven by a desperation he hadn't felt since the day he'd deserted after Sand Creek. Nadwa matched him mile for mile, her determination as fierce as his newfound purpose. On the second night, camped under stars that seemed to judge his every breath, Nadwa spoke quietly across the fire. "My mother said the young soldier cried. After Sand Creek, she saw him alone, after the shooting stopped, kneeling in snow." Jacob's throat tightened. He'd forgotten that moment, or tried to. "I wanted to die that day." "But you didn't," Nadwa said. "You lived. Maybe for this." Maybe so you could be here now, riding to stop another Sand Creek instead of running from the first one." "That's a generous interpretation," Jacob said bitterly. "No," she replied. "It is true one. Redemption doesn't come from hiding. It comes from choosing differently when the moment comes again." Her words stayed with him as they rode through the third day, finally cresting a ridge that overlooked the Comanche peace village in the valley below, teepees arranged in careful rows, smoke rising from cooking fires, children playing near the river. Peaceful, trusting, exactly like Black Kettle's village had been. "We have hours," Jacob said grimly. "Let's hope it's enough." The village council listened to Jacob with skepticism that bordered on hostility. A white man claiming a massacre was coming, supported only by a young woman and a stolen document. The head chief, a weathered man named 10 Bears, studied the military order with shrewd eyes. "Why should we believe this?" 10 Bears demanded. "Why should we believe you?" Jacob met his gaze without flinching. "Because I was at Sand Creek. I was a coward who watched it happen and did nothing. I've been running from that for 3 years. His voice cracked. "I won't run from this. If you don't believe me, I'll stay here and face whatever comes. But please, at least move the women and children." Something shifted in 10 Bear's expression. He looked at Nadua. "You trust this man?" "My mother trusted him when he could have killed her," Nadua said. "He chose mercy then. He chooses it again now." The debate lasted agonizing minutes before 10 Bears raised his hand for silence. "We move, all of us. The document is real, the signature is real, and I will not gamble with our people's lives on the hope that white soldiers honor their word this time." He turned to Jacob. "You will guide us north to the reservation at Fort Reno. They cannot attack us there without clear violation of federal territory." They broke camp within the hour, 300 people moving with practiced efficiency, born of too many forced relocations. Jacob rode alongside 10 Bears, directing their route through terrain that would be hardest for cavalry to follow. When they finally crossed onto Fort Reno land 2 days later, the tension that had gripped him for 5 days finally began to release. Henshaw's troops would arrive at an empty village and find nothing to massacre. The orders would be useless. The pattern would be broken. As the people of the village began to set up temporary camp, Nadua found Jacob standing apart, watching the sun set over the prairie. "You saved them," she said quietly. "We saved them," Jacob corrected. "You're the one who took the risk, who came to find me." "I found the man my mother said was there," Nadua replied. "The one buried under guilt and whiskey. The one who could still choose mercy." Jacob thought about the 3 years he'd wasted hiding, believing isolation was penance. "Your mother," he said slowly. "I wish I could tell her I'm sorry for not doing more at Sand Creek." "She knew you were sorry," Nadua said. "That's why she told me about you. She said someday you might get a second chance. She would be glad you took it." As night fell over the reservation, Jacob Cole realized that redemption hadn't come through grand gestures or dramatic transformations. It had come through a knock on his door, a girl asking for shelter, and the courage to finally stop running from who he'd been and become who he needed to be. He couldn't change Sand Creek, but he'd changed what came after.